Greetings, Hooper Kratos here, experienced Magic Brick Wars player, and I wanted to talk to you about the current state of the meta. The meta's been static for a while. It may change tomorrow, who knows, but for right now, it's kind of been in a holding pattern. I would say there's kind of three metas currently. One is the core meta with your standard balanced deck. The second is a mana brick style deck where you take advantage of the mana brick mechanics, and the third is centered around the angel. I think there are three main strategies. Those are them currently. This deck right here, this is the core standard deck. It's based around the Koala and the Ninja. These 3 mana cards here, they give you a lot of oomph for the amount of mana that you have to pay into them. The Koala, of course, is, it has a lot of hit points, and of course it does the jumping thing, and it's got glitches and all this kind of stuff. The Ninja has high attack speed, as well as being a little faster, and does the dodgy thing, and has a few glitches associated with it. So these are great for taking hearts, and it can be very intimidating to play against a player who's using both the Koala and the Ninja. Sometimes they're both on the board at the same time, and you're trying to stop both of them, and it takes a lot of thought and effort to do that. That's great. They're usually best when matched up with a tank. You can either play with the Mummy or the Viking. I don't think the Dragon is good right now. And your choice between the Mummy and the Viking depends on whether you want to be offensive or defensive. If you want to be offensive, you pick the Mummy. It's not affected by magic bricks, and it moves a little bit faster. The Viking is better for defense because it can stop anything. And so you got to know that in your choice between the two of them, and you have to play them that way. So you have to, when you play your Viking, if you're using a Viking, it's best if you play it in response to somebody else's tank. So you've got the Koala, the Ninja, and then some sort of tank like a Viking or a Mummy. Then you've got some standard cards, the Witch Doctor, the 1-mana robot, which is better than the Scallywag, the Boulder, which is like pretty much necessary to have in your deck at all times, and because it kills a lot of stuff that costs more than 2 mana for only 2 mana. The Cold Snap is the best way to destroy mana bricks right now, and mana bricks being so important, it is great to have a really fast way to destroy mana bricks. Very often you can get the Cold Snap off before your opponent even gets a single mana from their mana brick, and that is really important. All these cards here are just kind of standard core cards to have. We'll get to the Scallywag in a second. The Poison Brick is a must-have for your bricks pretty much all the time. The Trap Brick is maybe slightly better than the Stonewall Brick right now after they nerfed the Stonewall Brick a little bit. So maybe you'd pick the Trap Brick over the Stonewall Brick. It doesn't really matter. If you're really worried about the Mummy, actually, the Stonewall Brick is better. So if you have trouble, if you're constantly losing hearts to the Mummy, you might as well put in the Stonewall Brick instead. The third brick is your offensive brick. This is kind of the core meta deck here is a little bit offensive in its leaning. So you want to have a brick that helps you with that. You can use the Shield Brick, in which case you drop your Mummy or your Koala in the Shield Brick, and you back it up with your Witch Doctor, and you're hoping that your Witch Doctor gets shielded on the way through. That's what you'd use the Shield Brick for. You could also use the Zippy Brick and speed up your Mummy. It's pretty terrifying to have an extra fast Mummy coming at you. So that's an option for your offensive brick. And of course, always a great option for your offensive brick is the Skeleton Brick. It's always nice to have swarms of skeletons heading at your opponent for free. So that's never a bad choice. So this is kind of like your standard core deck here. You can switch out your offensive magic brick. All the rest of this is pretty much, this is what you need. Then this last card here, which I have the Scallywag, you can put almost anything in here. You can put a, that's either 1 or 2 mana. Some people play with the Miner, and they use that to diffuse magic bricks. Of course, when you play with a 2-mana card, your average cost goes up by 0.1. So it went up from 2.4 to 2.5. Maybe you're comfortable with that. Another 2-mana card that you can use is the Riding Hood. I kind of go back and forth as to which is better in a deck, the Miner or the Riding Hood. The Riding Hood, its base stats are better, and the disguise function is kind of cool. But diffusing magic bricks is really powerful, so take your pick. Personally, I think if a lot of people are using a 2-mana card like the Miner or the Riding Hood, then often putting in something that costs a little less mana is good, and then you can beat your opponent with mana. Another 1-mana card that you can use is the Smoke Bomb. A lot of people are switching to this. I started switching to this in some of my decks, especially on my second account. The Smoke Bomb gives you that little extra bit of damage. You put your mummy in front of your opponent's mummy, and then you drop the Smoke Bomb on top of the 2 mummies, and that little extra bit of damage from the Smoke Bomb can make it so your mummy wins in the mummy versus mummy battle. So it can be very useful for that. Now, if you play with a 3-spell deck, you have to keep cycling through your cards, which might mean dropping your Smoke Bomb a little more often than you might normally think of using it, just to keep your cards cycling through. But if you drop it someplace where it's going to damage some units, you almost never regret it. Because it does impact your opponent psychologically, because they can't see a section of the board, and that's always annoying. And then it does a little bit of extra damage for 1 mana. There's almost no loss in playing it usually, so you play it a few extra times to help it cycle through your deck. So this is the core meta deck. It's based around, like I said, the Koala and the Ninja, using a tank with it, either the Mummy or the Viking. And then some standard cards around it. You've got this one optional card here, and then you've got an optional offensive brick. You can always, if you want to go more defensive, you can always throw in the Stonewall brick just to be more defensive. Then there is the mana brick concept. So the core deck, it does not do anything extra to take advantage of the mana brick comeback mechanic that they have put in the game now. So you're the only mana bricks that this deck will get are the ones that automatically come as part of your brick rotation. But this deck here, this is based around the Summon Magic brick, which can get you extra mana bricks. So the idea here with this deck is you're trying to out-mana your opponent one way or another. So the average cost is pretty low. Anytime you get below 2.4, it's a low mana deck. And so the average cost of this deck is low. And then it also produces extra mana bricks constantly. And this means that whether you're tied or behind, you're always generating extra mana. And if your opponent if you are ahead, you're often still ahead in mana because your average cost of your deck is lower. And so you're almost always ahead of your opponent in mana, and you're playing extra units that your opponent has trouble responding to. That is the goal of this deck. So you can use a tank here. You can pick the Viking or the Mummy again. You pretty much drop out your Ninja because, again, the point of this deck is all about mana. And to have 2 3-mana cards in your deck, the average cost would go up. You have your Witch Doctor and your Robot. Those are standard core cards that don't cost very much. Again, you still have your Boulder and your Cold Snap for the same reasons as the core deck. So pretty much all you've done with this deck is you switched out the Summon Magic brick for the Ninja, which to me is a very major change in how you play the deck. This is no longer about dashing fast units down and stealing hearts from your opponent. This is about measured play, analytical play, strategic play, where you are very defensive and you just slowly accumulate a mana advantage over your opponent. You use basically the same bricks, but I would suggest not using the shield brick or the zippy brick. Basically, your choices are between an offensive brick, which is the skeleton brick, which adds a little extra swarm, gives you more chances of taking some hearts from your opponent, or you can pick the Stonewall brick, which is getting you really defensive. With a low average cost deck, your problem is always trying to stop everything that your opponent sends at you, because sometimes the only cards you have in your deck just aren't powerful enough to stop your opponent. Especially if you're playing with a smoke bomb and you have 4 spells, it can be hard to stop everything your opponent sends at you. And so with the Stonewall Brick, you slow down your opponent enough to give yourself a chance to rotate through your cards and get something that that can actually stop the units that are coming your way. Now, so you can use the Stonewall Brick as a defense, the Skeleton Brick as an offense, and just as with the core meta deck, this Smoke Bomb is your extra card that you can pick something different for. You can use the Skellywag to give you a little extra swarm, so you can send a couple 1-mana units down all the time. So he's always having to respond to different 1-mana units, and you could use the Miner or the Riding Hood. You know, those are options. I definitely use the Smoke Bomb in my second account because it helps me balance out level differences, because my Viking's only level 10. A lot of my opponents have a level 13 Viking, so I throw the Smoke Bomb on top of it to try and balance that out a little bit. I just want to point out it's really powerful to use the Trap Brick with the Summon Magic Brick. The number of magic bricks that this deck produces can be ridiculous. There are definitely games where I have a magic brick in every lane, and you can tell my opponent is trying to figure out where to play their units, because no matter what lane they put their units in, they're going to trigger a magic brick somewhere. So this can be a real pain to play against. So this is the Mana Brick meta deck. So this is the core meta deck. This is the Mana Brick meta deck. And then this is kind of an example of an Angel meta deck. I do think the Angel is pretty powerful, and you have to think through how you're going to use the Angel. Basically, once you put the Angel in your deck, you're forced to pull out the Ninja. And so you're no longer this fast-moving, striking deck that can steal hearts from your opponent. So once you put that Angel in, you automatically have a slower-moving deck. So then you have to think through, how am I going to take hearts? And one of your issues is that the Angel is not very powerful in a fight. It does not do very good fighting other units. And so you lose a lot of defense in this deck. Chances are, if you use the Angel, you're going to lose a heart somewhere. And you can try your best, and if you're up against a not as good opponent and you play really well, maybe you can avoid losing hearts at all. But chances are you will lose hearts. So then you have to think through, how are you going to take more hearts than your opponent? And the way to do that is by getting a tank or two down to your opponent's wall. Your tanks will take 1.5 hearts. So if you can shield and heal a tank all the way down to your opponent's wall, then you will eventually win out in the number of hearts that you use. So I would highly advise using tanks. This is a 2-tank deck, which is very difficult to play, but it's a lot of fun to play if you can get the hang of it. You use the Shield Brick, because with the shields that the Angel gives, and the Shield Brick giving shields, your opponent can have a really tough time destroying a tank. So the idea is you absorb a little bit of damage, maybe. You're hoping not to, but maybe you will. Then you use the extra mana that you get from being behind to then play a tank or two, and then you shield it and heal it all the way down to your opponent's wall. And what you're hoping is that your opponent either has to waste more mana than you have to kill your tank plus the Angel, or they can't manage to stop you in time and you take a heart and a half at least. And if you play this deck right, very often you will get near the end and you'll be able to play 2 tanks and an Angel, and at that point your deck is pretty much unstoppable. So these are the 3 current metas that I think are out there. You know, if you're the more inexperienced you are, I would say settle for the core meta deck. If you're a little more experienced, maybe you can use the Mana Brick deck. You know, it's a little more tricky, and you kind of have to keep your wits about you. If you're even more experienced, you may actually have difficulty with the Mana Brick deck because that is so different from the way the game has been for a long time. So that may be difficult. I think the Angel meta is probably a little inferior to the others. So if I had to rank them for most players, I would say go with the core deck, next go with the Mana Brick deck, and lastly go with an Angel meta deck. So I think that's the current state of the meta. You've got these